الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه وعليه نتوكل ونتوب إليه ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله هو خاتم الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين فصلوات الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. نسلم اليوم بتحية الجنة في الروض. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I want to change gears a little bit today. We've been talking about the last several weeks, sharing some of the stories of the Anbiya, the Qasas, right? The different stories. We had talked about Zachariah, about Isa, about Yahya, about Sulaiman. We had talked about a number of the stories of the different prophets of Allah and how they shared some commonalities in their relationship with Allah. So I want to actually continue to talk about this very topic, our relationship with Allah, but I'm going to then really get us to examine, inshallah, today, what is our personal relationship, what is it like with Allah? We have all of these, wonderful and great examples in the Quran, but then ultimately it does come down to our personal commitment and what we're either willing or not willing to do. And the first thing is to really ask, the question is, do we have a desire to get closer to Allah? Now, many of you would say, of course. Now, what I'm saying is, I'm not talking about wish. I wish I could be closer to Allah. No. Do you have the himmah? Do you have the desire that will transform itself into action to get closer to Allah versus just simply whimsical desires? Because as we know, many of us would love to lose 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds. Very few of us on a consistent basis are willing to do what it takes, go to the gym, change our diet, get better stress management, so on and so forth. And therefore, to be honest, right, because if we're going to have a relationship with Allah, it has to be built upon honesty. And therefore, we should just be honest. Do I really want to? And therefore, does my life, do my actions reflect my sincere desire to get closer? Not that you may make sincere desire and that you trip and stumble and fall as we all do, but in earnest, do I really want to get closer to Allah? So that's the first step. Is that what we want? Is our niyyah, as one of the books of hadith, it begins with, right, that actions are based upon their intentions. So we have to, innama a'malu binniyat, right? If we really want to examine our life critically, in the way that we would do with so many other areas in our life. If we wanted to get a better job, if we wanted to advance in our career, if we wanted to get a better education, we can very easily and probably do or have taken the steps to ensure that those things manifest. And it isn't just a matter of waiting for Allah to manifest it in our lives or to make it happen. Of course, we say, inshallah. But then we took the intermediate steps, whether it was, studying or saving money or whatever. We took intermediary steps to actually realize those goals. So in our quest to try to have a closer and more tangible feeling of having a closeness with Allah, then we have to really ask ourselves some honest and tough questions, not about not the face that we're presenting to each other, not the face that we present when we come to the masjid, not the face that we present to mom and dad, but the real conversation in the depth of our heart. Am I really doing this, or is this really just empty wishes? And then from this, ask ourselves, if that's true, inshallah that's true, that's what we want, then just like a real life relationship, we should ask ourselves, what will that relationship look like? Because if we're only stuck in an abstract notion, meaning something that we don't really know what it looks like, we don't know what it feels like, we don't know what the smell and touch and taste, and we don't know those things, then again, that's probably going to make it difficult for us to make that goal become a reality. So ask ourselves, right? What is it that I think that I want this relationship to look like? Do I hope that my relationship with Allah will mean that when I make dua, He answers? He gives me what I ask for? Again, to echo back to the dua, to the verse that Allah Ta'ala reveals about Zakaria, لَمْ أَكُمْ بِدُعَائِكَ رَبِّ شَقِيًّا, right? He doesn't say, oh Allah, I'm so happy with everything you've given me. He says, what? I'm happy to call upon you. This is an insight into maybe what we should be looking for the relationship to be like. That it is not purely transactional based, but it is also based upon truth. And like even in a human relationship, what is it that we will bring to that relationship? If a man with his wife or a wife with her husband, right? If you don't bring anything to the relationship, which even if you're the most beautiful woman in the world, or you're even the most handsome man in the world, it's going to take more than sitting around and looking beautiful and more than sitting around and looking handsome to make the relationship work. So in your relationship with Allah, what do you bring to it? Now, we might be tempted to say, well, what can I get the one that has everything? Lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fil ard. Everything in the heavens and the earth belongs to Allah. And yet, He does ask us to do some things. And there is a little bit today, we'll talk about the insight into taking some of the mystery out of trying to have a closer relationship with Allah, but first, as if I can use a slightly fancy word, to decenter ourselves, decenter our desires of what we would either like to do or be willing to do, and focus more on what is it that Allah Himself has said that is pleasing and beloved to Him, and that of course we will find demonstrated by His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the third component we can look at is, again, even like with the human relationship, what kind of time are you willing to invest? Not only in human romantic relations, but even in the relations between parent and child. And some of us who have kids, we know that sometimes we obsess over, am I spending enough time with my kid? Am I spending enough time with my kid? And that's true. We need to spend time with our children. But as we learn, especially, I only got one kid, but I've seen from some other veterans that have more than one, that you begin to learn that it isn't only the quantity of time, but also, obviously, the quality of time. And that Allah has arranged this hayat ad-dunya, this worldly life, that we will be occupied. We have to earn a living. We have to take care of our parents, our children, and all these other things. So naturally, our time will not be purely in devotion to Allah. Now, this may shock some of you coming from Imam, but I'm just saying, realistically, we will not be able to spend all 24 hours a day in worship to Allah. At least 4 to 8 of them is going to be spent sleeping, and then another 2 is probably stuck either on the 10 or the 210 or some other horrible freeway somewhere, right? So, a number of hours of the day are going to be dedicated, and of course, while we're at work or we're studying. So we do need to think about not only fretting and having anxiety over the quantity of time, but then we must ask ourselves, when I do have some time, what is my state of mind? Where is my heart at? Where is my focus at? And am I trying to put in quality time with Allah, not simply quantity time? Now, what makes this a little bit more tricky in terms of having a relationship with Allah is that Allah doesn't talk to any of us, right? In the way that He spoke with Musa alayhi salam, or that He spoke with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and some of the different anbiya, right? So nobody today has this wonderful benefit to have a two-way conversation with Allah. And therefore that can make it maybe a little more difficult. How do you have a relationship with somebody that you don't talk to? And we should be honest about that. I think especially for some, of our younger people, how do you have a relationship with somebody that you don't talk to? I always push back and say, man, y'all have a real tight relationship with your phone that doesn't talk to you either, but unless you consider Siri, talking to Siri, to be a conversation. But what will help to actually make this work, right? Because every relationship has to have some kind of mechanics, right? We're mostly grown people here. There's a certain kind of mechanics between a husband and a wife, vice versa, of which, right, allows that relationship to move on its path, right? It's what allows it to go on the rails, so to speak, right? And even in platonic relationships between, two men that are friends, whether there's some kind of platform that allows us, right, to have relationships. So in our relationship with Allah Ta'ala, one of those is absolutely the salah. The prayer is absolutely in its hikmah, in its wisdom that Allah has prescribed it for us. In the wisdom of having these prayers that are repetitive, that you do the same thing over and over, right? It is what allows us to go beyond abstraction, and very importantly, allows us to go beyond our feelings so that we don't become consumed with ourselves. Just like in a regular relationship, if the only person you're thinking about is yourself in your relationship will suffer. So likewise, if your relationship with Allah is only concerned about yourself, then your relationship with Allah Ta'ala likewise will also suffer. And therefore that goes back to, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to put in? What are we willing to go beyond our comfort zone? And in fact, one of the earliest chapters revealed, Allah Ta'ala says to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, giving him specific command and advice, but allows us to also see kind of, what was it like to be the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What was it like to be Muhammad alayhi salam? What was it like to be Rasulullah? We think like, man, the Prophet could have asked for anything, or everything was already arranged and everything was easy. Ya ayyuhal muzammilu qum al-layla illa qalila. So Allah tells the Prophet at the beginning of their relationship, "O Muhammad, get up in the middle of the night. Get up in the middle of the night and stand in prayer. Nisfahu aw unqus minhu qalilan." Maybe half, a little more, a little less. وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا أَوْ زِدْ عَلَيْهِ أَوْ رَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. What is it? But what? The recitation of the Quran, which here is connected to the salah, right? So in the beginning of the relationship, which we might think, man, this is the honeymoon phase and I got to get up in the middle of the night. In the beginning, Allah Ta'ala is dictating the way the relationship is going to work. If we're going to have a relationship with Allah, we must first get it out of our minds. What? Laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah is not like His creation. He's not another person. He's not a brother, a friend, a wife, a husband. He's not human. There's nothing like Him, and therefore, He gets to dictate what the relationship is going to be like. So He tells the Prophet ﷺ, get up in the middle of the night and pray. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, and recite the Quran. إِنَّا سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. We're going to put a heavy word upon you. What is this word? Right, obviously for him, alayhi salam, it's the Quran, but even for us to recite the Quran, it's a heavy thing. Even in modern English, when we say heavy, it doesn't have a bad connotation. When we say something's heavy, it means it's deep. You want to have a real relationship with Allah? Be willing to move beyond your comfort zone. Get up in the middle of the night. We're always, I see so many people looking for spirituality. And the big problem with this word is that nobody even knows what it means. It's related to spirit, but the ality part, what is it? Because in the ality of spirituality, what's the framework? What are the conditions of it? The problem is, it kind of can be whatever you want it to be. But with Allah, it's what? قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Get up in the middle of the night and pray. Now, some of the Mufassirun, they said, well, obviously for him, this was wajib. He had to do it. But even for us, we know that this is one of the great acts that is one of the great sunan of the Prophet ﷺ, right? One of the great devotional acts that we can do. Why? Well, first off, Allah Ta'ala actually talks about that. He says what? In the middle of the night, إِنَّ نَاشِيَةِ اللَّيْلِ هُوَ أَشَدُّ وَطَعًا وَأَقْوَمُ قِيلًا. In the middle of the night, what? You are freed from all of your earthly distractions. You are freed from work, from homework, from bosses, from this and that, board meetings and all this stuff. You are freed from all of the distractions of this life. And it is also, most importantly, what's going on between you and your Lord. It isn't something you can Instagram. It isn't something you can tweet about. It isn't, matter of fact, if you're kind of live tweeting your tahajjud, you're probably doing it wrong. Right? So it is about having something private, something wonderful. This is the horrible part about our society, even with human relations, which I find it interesting. Again, we're all adults. We should be able to have this conversation. In a society that has become at once so obsessed with sex, and yet every other commercial on television about something to help a person maintain their sexual relationship, there's something toxic going on here. Maybe what would happen is if you took all of that out of the public stimulation and put it where it belongs in private, maybe people wouldn't have so many problems in their love life. Well, in our relationship with Allah, maybe if we took a little bit less time in the public sphere and worked more privately, then perhaps we would really feel that we have a relationship with Allah Ta'ala, that we don't have to guess at it and then go searching for other spiritualities that we don't even know what the root is, what the focus is, what the goal is, what the outcome is, and most importantly, is it even something that is pleasing to Allah? It might be pleasing to my nafs. I heard something last night. One imam, he said it's really interesting. He said, when you think about people that commit fornication, it's not that they're not having a good time, right? Matter of fact, they're probably having a great time. But it's something ugly and distasteful to Allah. Even though in the midst of it, he said they're literally blowing their minds. And in the same way, we should be looking to have something that we can have that relationship with Allah, but we don't have to worry about is it something distasteful, but also more importantly, it is something that's rooted in a private affair. Because that's where the sincerity, right, is going to come out. So going back to the idea of the salah is also, prayer is what allows you to have a routine. And let's be honest, most of us in many areas of our life, if we don't have routine, we tend to fail. Just think about it. If everybody in this room had to be an individual business owner, how many of us would be reliably paying our rent, paying our mortgage, right? Most people are not, it's not that they don't have the capacity to be a business owner and take full responsibility. They work a job because that takes a certain skill set and whatnot, right? Routine. Imagine if none of us had to work. We think that would be great, right? I remember when I first transitioned from IT to being imam, I had like a break in between. The first week was magical. The second week was actually the opposite of magical because I needed a routine. I was like, what do I do with myself? I don't know what to do. The salah is also very, very beneficial to us because it gives us a routine. So don't have a negative attitude about these repetitive, ritualistic things, so to speak, in our deen. They're there for a benefit for us, and they're there to provide a means of guidance and a means of how to. It's also that, to be honest, just like again, with any relationship, it cannot be purely an intellectual or emotional affair, right? The body's got to go along with it, right? Even in human relationships, your body has to go with you so you can have relationships with other people. And in the same way, we have to make what? Wudu. It's physical. We have to make takbir. We have to make ruku'. We have to make sajda, right? Yes, it's the soul that's in our body, but we need our body to go along with it in this life. That's part of how it works. So if you want to have a closer, tangible, meaningful relationship or improve it with Allah, turn to the prayer. There's no need to search for abstract things that nobody even knows whether they work or what or not. Allah Ta'ala talks about inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal baghi. Right? That the prayer is that what it does, it helps to remove certain impurities within the soul and it expiates the sins. This is what our spirituality and this is what our relationship with Allah Ta'ala can be built upon. And many of us would love to be able to read the Quran every single day. But actually the tahajjud in particular, and this is what I'm emphasizing a little bit today. I know you're probably disappointed, like, oh my God, tahajjud. But the tahajjud prayer, right, is the way that you will move beyond reciting the same 2 or 3 surahs over and over and over every day. Let's be honest, most of us have probably memorized 3 or 4 surah, right? And the reason why is because we tend to recite the same surah at the same salah every day at the same time, and part of it is just because of time constraint. So real popular is Asr, Ikhlas, Nas. Why is this? Why don't we even just learn a little bit from Surah Al-Rahman, or a little bit from Surah Al-Waqi'ah, or a little bit from Surah Al-Baqarah, or like some little piece from maybe you like the stories of the Anbiya, right? Why don't you learn just the first half page of Surah Maryam or something? You can do this. You don't have to recite the whole entire surah. And in doing so, especially if you make it part of your practice, your spiritual discipline in the evening, guess what? You will eventually build up to it. It will not come in one day. It may not even come in 1 week. But just likewise, I don't care how much you lifted once going to the gym, you will not change physically outside. But they do tell you the very first time you begin to lift weights, something does actually begin to happen with the body on the inside. So if you want to see changes on the outside, you have to first make the effort and then stay with it in its consistency. So use the salah, which is this thing that Allah has made for us. Don't view it as a burden. View it as a primary means of having a meaningful and gratifying connection with the one that made you. So inshallah, in the second khutbah, we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that we can, inshallah, pursue this to make it more real. May Allah first forgive us for our sins and overlook for us our misdeeds. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا ذُنُوبَنَا وَكَفِّرْ عَنَّا سَيِّئَاتِنَا أَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ أَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ أَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وصلواته وسلامه على نبيه الشريف وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So I'm going to relate to you a hadith. Most of you already know this hadith. And it's the story of when Jibreel alayhi salam, the angel of revelation, comes to sit with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam amidst some of the companions. بين نحن عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم right ذات يوم إذ طلع عندنا رجل شديد بياض الثياب. Right, so one day Jibreel comes and the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم is there sitting with a number of his companions, Omar, and one of the hadith it's Omar radiallahu anhu who's relating this. And he says this guy comes out of nowhere, we didn't recognize him, he nobody knew him from anywhere, and yet he was extremely, like almost radiant white in his clothing. But also he was like his hair was like jet black, no signs of travel, and nobody knew him. And again, like this is a community that people knew people. So there's something different about him. And then on top of it, he sits down in a way with the Prophet ﷺ in one of the riwayats, one of the narrations, in which like they're like literally like knee to knee, and he puts his hands on the thighs of the Prophet. And then he begins to pose some questions for him. And what's really amazing here, now most of us are familiar with this hadith, right? And I'm going to skip to the end of the hadith actually. So at the very end of it, the Prophet ﷺ asked Umar, do you know who that was? And he said, Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, this was Jibreel who came to teach you your religion. Now we all know that he told them about what is iman and ihsan and these other things, right? And we'll swing back to that in a minute. But think about this. He said, this is Jibril who came to teach you your religion. Well, who is the Prophet ﷺ? What was his purpose other than to teach people religion? After all, he's the messenger of Allah. So is this just like quality assurance by Allah to, just make sure that, he doesn't make a mistake? Or, one, in a certain kind of way, Jibril is kind of like the teacher of the Prophet ﷺ. And most importantly, sometimes when it comes to learning things, right, it's good to have a couple of different sources, right? So even though the Prophet ﷺ has been with these companions and has been teaching them Islam over and over, they've been hearing the Quran from him and seeing his character and his actions, and yet he comes in a way to what? Make it succinct, make it clear, make it accessible so people can get on with their lives. So he says to the Prophet ﷺ, أخبرني عن الإسلام. Inform me what is Islam. Now again, if they didn't know what Islam was by now and they're with the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, right? But he said, make it succinct, right? In the fact that, look at this, 1400 years later, this is reaching us. So people today, what is Islam? Right? And we all know what it's to profess the faith, what, shahadu la ilaha illallah, shahadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And then, not only to believe in Allah and Muhammad sallallahu is the last prophet, but to believe in what al-malaika, essentially the angels, the unseen, the books, the day of judgment, qadr, right? Li khayrihi wa sharrihi, right? Believing in predestination, so to speak, it's good and bad, right? Goes into all this. And then he asks him, what is ihsan? Right? And he said, what it is to worship Allah Ta'ala as if you see him. But you will not be able to see him, know that he sees you. The manifestation of this principle that Jibril came to ensure that we all knew what this deen was can be manifested in your relationship with Allah primarily through the performance of prayer. Now I know I don't give a lot of khutab, really hammering about some of the ibadat, the different rituals and whatnot, but I do believe it's time to swing back around and to remind ourselves the primacy, right, the high level that Allah Ta'ala has made the prayer. Because it's going to be one of the very first things that we're questioned about on the Day of Judgment. It is one of the primary means of not only being forgiven for sins, but also of protecting and developing a behavior in which we will avoid them. And most importantly, it takes the guesswork out of what is pleasing to Allah. It takes the guesswork out of pleasing to Allah. This is one of the primary means that we can develop a meaningful, assured relationship with the one that made us. And out of the salat, of course, we have to do the 5 during the day, but this one at night, at tahajjud, right? It's named tahajjud for a reason, which means what? Struggle, right? One of the non-obligatory prayers that's most beloved to Allah is going to be what? A struggle. Meaning that it's not going to be on what's easy for me. It's not going to be on my own time. It's not what I feel like doing. Because you know what? I may not really feel like doing tahajjud because I'm tired, or I'm lazy, or I work a lot, or I'm stressed. But it's precisely the struggle beyond all of these things is where the sweetness with the relationship with Allah Ta'ala lies. And if we are trying to find some other way of gratifying ourselves by ignoring what He has mandated through the life of His Prophet ﷺ, we're kidding ourselves. And we're not really interested in true spirituality. We're really just interested in narcissism, what makes ourselves happy. So I pray that Allah Ta'ala will bless you and myself to make us the people of Salah, to make us the people who seek earnestly to be close with Him despite whatever sins we have committed, that we still continuously seek His favor, His forgiveness, and to strive to be close to him, qurba. We try to be close to him, and through this, he will inshallah forgive us our sins